Hello and welcome to India's Eye. US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un have signed a joint declaration to establish new bilateral relations and work towards lasting peace through complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. President Trump has also offered unspecified security guarantees to North Korea. America has also decided to halt military exercises with South Korea. To discuss the implications of the deal and to analyze who gains what, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Skand Tayal, a distinguished diplomat. He has served as India's missions in Sofia, Warsaw, Geneva, Moscow, Johannesburg, and Houston. He was the Ambassador of India to the Republic of Korea. We have with us Mr. Bharat Karnad, one of our foremost strategic affairs experts. He is Professor for National Security Studies at the Center for Policy Research, I beg your pardon. He is also an author of the forthcoming book, Staggering Forward, Narendra Modi and India's Global Ambition. We have with us Dr. Jitendra Uttam. He is an expert on the Korean Peninsula. He studied in Seoul in South Korea and teaches at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Tayal, let me begin with you. Do you think that President Trump and Mr. Kim Jong-un agreed to more than what the document they have signed suggests? And why is it that people are saying that President Donald Trump has given a media coup to Kim Jong-un and has received precious little in return? He's got nothing from him.
Maharji, I believe that there are three processes going on the Korean Peninsula which are somewhat interlinked. One is the whole negotiations between United States and North Korea, where United States want denuclearization of North Korea and North Korea wants recognition as an equal, sanctions should be lifted, and economic assistance, and on that there has been some progress. Second process is the whole path of the North and South Korea which they have charted out and declared to the world in their 27th April Panmunjom declaration, where they say that there will be no more war on the Korean Peninsula, the two Koreas will seize the fate, they will control the fate of the Korean people and move towards some kind of unification. And the third thing in which all the other regional countries are involved is that what will be the future of Korean Peninsula. And in my view, in the press conference, President Trump has indicated a gradual retreat of United States from Korean Peninsula when he announced that immediately the exercises between South Korean forces and United States will be removed. And he alluded that I want to bring the 32,000 boys back home, and it is not part of the equation now, but I wish it will be. North Korea will seize upon this opening and will make sure that the American presence in South Korea is drastically reduced, which will help please China very much.
Okay, we're going to discuss this further, but before that let me ask Professor Bharat Karnad this. The US President described as the declaration as comprehensive, but if you read the declaration, it's anything but that. At best you can say it's a statement of intent. And he's left it for, let's say, the Sherpas from two sides to work out the details. Is that a correct reading, or do you think it is actually a very comprehensive agreement?
No, it's not. It's merely an outline, as you just pointed out. But the more important thing, I think, is that the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has explained that there is a lot that was discussed, that's on the table, that is not reflected in the communique that was issued. So if that's to be taken at his word, that would mean that there's a certain level of agreement on most of the issues raised by either party. Yeah. Now, that really will not obtain the kind of agreement that Trump is looking towards. Because when you talk about denuclearization, the two sides have very different ideas as to what it's supposed to mean. As far as North Korea is concerned, they'd like all of US forces to get out of the Korean Peninsula, and if possible out of Japan as well, anywhere from where their weapons can reach North Korea. As far as the US is concerned, they are sort of intent on obtaining what is called the complete, irreversible, verifiable disarmament of the North Korean arsenal. Essentially, that's what it is. Now, verifiable means putting inspectors there from the IAEA and so on. That's not going to happen. And even assuming that Kim Jong-un has agreed to some such in a vague sort of way, it means that this is a long drawn out affair. 25 years, 30 years, it's like saying you're looking towards a nuclear zero. It's a good thing. Everybody agrees it's a good thing, but it's not going to be obtained in a hurry anytime soon. So these are the kinds of infirmities in the joint communique that you can obviously see, and that hasn't been clarified by either side.
Yeah. So, Dr. Uttam, so do you think that given the kind of infirmities that Professor Bharat Karnar is pointing towards, would it have been better that at least some of the details had been worked out earlier and then the declaration signed? If you look at the Iran nuclear deal, a lot of detailing was done before the agreement was signed. Do you think that would have been a better idea, or do you think it is better that advantageous that the two principals make these broad statements and then it's left to the junior staff to work out the details?
I think the complexity of the Korean problem is very different from the other cases, Iran, Libya, and other places. And what was happening a couple of months before, the distance was so wide. If they would have worked out all the details, I think it would have been very difficult to reach where they have reached right now. So I think this summit was a success, and both sides, what the Trump was looking for and what the Kim Jong-un looking for, I think both they have achieved. Now the harder part is that the international politics, the peninsular politics of the Korean Peninsula and the international politics, both, now they are going to play the part. And in that context, one has to understand that whether North Korean acceptance or reconfirmation that not only North Korea, but the entire Korean Peninsula should be free from the nuclear weapons. I think this confirmation by North Korea is only to get the sanctions lifted. I think because seeing the history of North Korea, it has devoted entire energy to develop these weapons, and also there is understanding in North Korea as well as in South Korea that North Korea has been getting this summit meeting. First time his grandfather, father, they never got this opportunity, and this opportunity came only because North Korea has a nuclear weapon. So I don't think so, and I think President Trump, he tweeted, going back to US, he tweeted that there is no threat from a nuclear threat from North Korea. I think this statement and the summit itself will make North Korea to have some kind of freedom to trade. Okay. Even there are sanctions imposed.
Okay, but do you think, Ambassador Tayal, that the US has in effect conceded that sanctions will be lifted even before complete denuclearization of Korea, if that takes place ever? So it's a preparation for lifting of sanctions in a phased manner, perhaps?
Not really. President Trump in his press conference very clearly said that the sanctions will be lifted only when the nuclear capacity becomes ineffective. He used the word ineffective. And Pompeo today in Seoul very clearly in a press conference said that sanctions will not be lifted till there is complete denuclearization. That is now a question of negotiations and seesaw battle. But this whole process is very top driven. So President Trump is deciding what the American stance would be, what the US establishment is saying. That may be at variance with what President Trump has already conceded to Kim Jong-un in one-on-one, or what he may be willing to concede in the future. Because if you look at President Trump's personality, behavior in the last 1.5 months, he treats friends and foe alike. He is only for America first. And for America, his stated requirement, even as a candidate, was that North Korea should not have the capacity to strike at mainland United States. So he may not bother if the American troops withdraw from South Korea. That is the biggest worry for India.
Yeah. We'll come to troop withdrawal. Professor Khanna, you said denuclearization doesn't mean the same thing to the two sides. What does denuclearization mean to North Korea, for example? And how is it different from what it means to America? If the meanings are different, then you can't achieve a common goal.
Right. Well, it's such an umbrella concept, denuclearized Korean Peninsula, that it gives you the latitude for any side to interpret it any which way they want. Now the thing is that nothing in the Trump-Kim Jong-un joint communique is anything of a departure than the Panmunjom declaration of May 28th of this year, wherein Kim Jong-un promised precisely the same thing that he has said in the same thing. So, he has not, in any way withdrawn from his position, while it is Trump who has in fact given in. And I think to basically score a public relations point and to tell his American audiences that he is a great deal maker and that he has done this, that and the other, he has gone ahead and then committed America to a process of negotiation, which is precisely what Kim Jong-un intended from the very beginning, by way of establishing his bona fides as a leader of a state that heretofore had been, shall we say, was a pariah state, declared a rogue state by Washington. So he gets a leg up, even as Trump is left hanging, as it were, not having got anything
but
of
what does
substance.
denuclearization mean for Kim Jong-un?
No, it doesn't mean giving up anything on his part. He will not give up his thermonuclear weapons, because it is his thermonuclear bomb coupled to the Hwasong ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, that has got him to this position, wherein he cannot be ignored by Washington or anybody else. So do you think he's going to give it up? He's among the canniest guys going. You might think of him a buffoon, that's what Trump in fact talked of him in those terms.
How will he deal with sanctions then?
No, the sanctions is China is always there. In fact, this is the point, that between China, North Korea and Pakistan, you have an active, what I called a nuclear rogue triad. Do you think North Korea on its own has been able to do this, for God's sake? It is basically Chinese material expertise, including human material going out there, working, producing, conjuring up this weapon and giving it for them to test. North Korea has no assets, has no great resources of its own.
No, but his question was, and you answered it partially, Ambassador Skantal was saying, what happens to sanctions? If you don't give up on your thermonuclear weapons, your ICBMs, you're saying the Chinese are
going to sustain the Kim Jong-un regime, come what may.
So we are back to square one. Nothing
Absolutely.
has changed except the legitimacy.
It's the same
that Kim
thing as
Jong-un
the six-party talks in the 2006, 2007 era, 2004, 5, 6 era. So nothing has changed except insofar as there's that light at the end of the tunnel as far as North Korea is concerned, in saying, well, they may get something out of the Americans one way or the other. And because Trump seems more interested in getting a solution, he's the one who's going to make concessions. That's right.
Professor Uttam, this declaration doesn't say anything openly, at least, not in the public domain, about the ICBM program, the intercontinental ballistic missile program of North Korea. What happens to the missile program? Of course, they've said that one missile engine testing facility will be closed down. That doesn't mean the program is being closed down.
Yeah, actually, the communique says not much. However, North Korea may agree in the future that it can come under the range, what kind of range of the missile he can have, North Korea can have. Because the US public opinion and the US worry is that he has this missile capability that can deliver warheads to the US. However, like South Korea has some kind of limit that they cannot have the missile more than that.
I understand that. I'm saying, but it's not part of the declaration.
Yeah.
Do you think it's been part of the discussions already? That, look, it's not sufficient. You see, how do you deliver nuclear weapons? The delivery system is the ICBM. So is that part of the deal as of now?
In the communique, it doesn't say anything. But I think all the details about what actually President Trump has agreed and how much Kim Jong-un has moved into these directions in the denuclearization and also the missile proliferation. It is to be discussed by the experts, and then they can understand.
Okay. Now, President Trump has suggested that he would like China to be one of the signatories. The other one, of course, he says is South Korea. But what role do you see Beijing playing in the gradual or phased denuclearization of North Korea? How is it in the interest of China to denuclearize North Korea when they've given them the technology in the first place?
First, I will make a brief comment on the earlier question. I happened to be in Seoul on 26th May when the second meeting took place between the two Koreas. Now, the South Korean assessment is that North Korea will be willing to give up its nuclear weapon capacity, because now somehow Chairman Kim Jong-un is quite focused on the economic advancement of their country. And that's how President Moon has been able to convince him and bring him up to this task. That is their assessment. Now, as far as China's role is concerned, if they have promoted nuclear North Korea, absolutely right. But what was the objective? If North Korea gives up its nuclear capacity, and in return they are able to get rid of American presence from South Korea, I think it's a big achievement for them, because they would not like this to continue with America withdrawing and Japan getting ideas. So at some point, China will certainly want that North Korea may give up the nuclear capacity, South Korea gets Finlandized, and Japan is not then has any excuse to build the nuclear capacity.
Bharat, do you agree with this analysis? And my secondary question is, to what extent do Beijing's interests and Washington's interests coincide in the Korean Peninsula? As far as I can see, they don't coincide.
I agree with you. I don't think they do converge in any sense of the word, except very distantly, as the ambassador mentioned, in lifting, shall I say, a tactical problem for the Chinese, in having American forces right south of the in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Now the problem, as I see it, is this, and something more severe. South Korea is essentially a treaty ally of the United States, a treaty ally, and the provisions of which have been undercut by Trump. Because if there is no joint war games and joint exercises, etc., the 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea become, in a sense, useless because they rotate every 2 years. And every 2 years, therefore, they have to get back into sync with the local South Korean forces. If they do not exercise, do not hold war games, they are not really in battle condition and prepare to fight a war together, that is. So here you have Trump saying no more war games, no more this, no more that. It essentially, in a sense, disables the alliance and is against the treaty provisions. Now, if America can treat its treaty ally so casually, what are other friends of America in Asia to believe? And one other last thing, I do not think that Japan is going to be so easily deterred anymore from having its own nuclear weapons. Japan is just 10 days for having a weapon. They're that close. They're virtually a nuclear weapons power. You know, I mean, their officials say, those of us who have been in 1.5 track, we have been told in so many words by the Japanese at the highest levels that they can literally do it overnight. So the point is, if Japan goes nuclear, and they will, because the US has proved itself again and again as an infirm, inconstant friend and ally, in which case they'll get the nuclear weapons, and then I think the Chinese will be seriously discomfited.
No, so take 1 minute more and tell me, do you think China will see the US North Korea rapprochement as an opportunity to expand its strategic footprint in the Korean Peninsula, which is what Ambassador Skantayal was saying?
Well, look, I don't know expansion of its footprint, because I don't think South Korea is going to be that easily Finlandized. Because for the simple reason, that the South Koreans themselves have a latent nuclear weapons program, as you are no doubt aware. And it was, the lid was put on it by the Americans, who pressured them to not go ahead with tests and obtain the nuclear.
Now it is
that's right. But that's gone, isn't it? That particular deal is gone. If the US is going to withdraw, they're going to, and then they're going to what? Be left to the mercies of the Chinese to deal with a situation which Beijing may create at any time. So you see the problem for the South Koreans. They too will gravitate towards the option Tokyo is already firming up to have its own nuclear weapons.
So if we are to believe Professor Bharat Karnad, actually after this deal, there's an incentive for everybody to have a nuclear weapon there. South Korea has an incentive, Japan has an incentive. Let me ask you about Japan, for example. Now, after this deal, wouldn't Japan think that the Americans, can do any deal that suits them at any point of time, and that American-led security strategy for Northeast Asia is not something they can rely on in the long run?
Yeah, actually, President Trump, the way he handled the G7 summit and his sudden actually movements, and in those movements he is actually ditching many allies like Canada. Even the Japanese now, they are very much worried because I don't think so that they had the idea what is going to be in the summit. And now I was watching the television that the Japanese Prime Minister, he wants to have a summit meeting with the Kim Jong-Un. Why? Because they really, actually, the Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, they are like India and Pakistan. We can actually understand what they are saying, and we can also understand what they are not saying. So Japanese, they want to actually have direct communication now with North Korea and try to understand what really North Korea is up to, because American cards, they are very open what they are doing, but what North Korea is doing, whether it is playing on the Chinese script or it's his own script, we don't know exactly.
Okay. But let's say the American script would be get rid of your ICBMs also, as well as your nuclear weapons. But Japan is not threatened by ICBMs, threatened by the medium range missiles which are pointed at it, and it's been it's seen Korean missiles overfly its territory recently. So do you think Japan will take a more sort of what should we say, a more nuclear posture than it has up to now?
I entirely concur with this view. Now President Trump is transactional. His policy is America first. Do you think any time he will put New York at stake to save Tokyo? So the whole concept of extended nuclear deterrence is gone. Now it is for the Japanese to decide what to do. Of course the Abe wants to do it, but the public opinion, Professor Karnad, is still against it. So that is the problem. But if they know what is good for them, they will go that way. But one point I will make, that in South Korea, you talk to the liberal opinion, the conservative opinion, they always feel that these 28,500 American troops are to save them from North Korean aggression. They don't fear any aggression from China. And if Panmunjom declaration path is taken, then there is no aggression from North Korea. So the American troops become irrelevant.
Okay, we have discussed the Korean Peninsula and what's happening in Japan and China in great detail, but does it impact India in any way if there is denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula?
Well, look, I don't know, as I said,
denuclearization
is not going to happen. It's so distant a thing, it's like a receding horizon. The nearer you get to it, the farther it is. So that's not going to happen. But there is a lesson for India from the Kim Jong-Un Trump summit, and that is the value of having a high-yield thermonuclear weapon with ICBM as a delivery system, which is, I think, what I've been suggesting for 25 odd years now, in a one-man mission, really, of advocacy, because short of that, you really do not count. The reason you do not count is if you cannot lob nuclear ordnance onto the extreme targets, distance-wise, then there's always some, shall we say, distance separating you from the real great powers. And as long as we don't resume testing and don't get our own proven, tested and credible thermonuclear weapons and ICBMs. By the way, that's the deal we have made with the Americans, that we'll not have thermonuclear weapons of a proven quality, and we will not have, our missiles will not have extended intercontinental range. This is the problem. And I think it's going to cost us plenty.
But we've signed a no test agreement.
Well, no, we have not. We have still left open the voluntary moratorium.
But whether India needs another nuclear test is subject for another discussion. We've run out of time. I'd like to thank all my guests, Ambassador Skand Tayal, Professor Bharat Karnad, Professor Jitendra Uttam, for participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's Eye.